Due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with governor's executive order, emergency order number 12, issued pursuant executive order 2020-4, as extended by executive order 2021-08, the Nottingham Planning Board is authorized to meet electronically. Access to the meeting is given through Zoom. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate. If you have issues with connections, please feel free to contact Joanna at 679-9597, and she can hopefully help you reconnect. And as it was indicated earlier, we've got some thunderstorms rolling through. If connection is lost and there remains a quorum, then we're hoping that the meeting can continue. If it is down to where we cannot meet, then we'll adjourn the meeting and meet at a later date. First order of business probably here is just to do a roll call. I do want to just, I guess, ask Charlene if just make sure you got sworn in.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you can be a full participant at tonight's meeting. That's great. Thank you. Let me just run through the members. I already heard Ed speak, so sounds like he's got connection. Ian, I heard you speak. You have connection. Tyler, you here and ready to go?
Ready to go.
All right. And Charlene's good. Who else do we have? Buzz, are you on?
I'm here.
Okay. And I will seat Robert Davies for Susan Mooney for tonight's meeting.
Oh, Gary?
I'm here.
Oh, there's Gary. You were up in the far right corner. I missed you, sorry.
Not a problem.
All right, so we got a lot of people. Good. So one thing I wanted to start with, is Leanne on the phone? Is she joining? Okay. So Leanne contacted me last week and was looking at resigning her position. She's got some life busyness that's happening and is no longer able to commit to serving as an alternate. So she's going to resign that position. I do want to just take just a second to thank her for the service that she did provide. She filled in a great voice throughout our meetings that she attended. And I know that she still has particular interest in weighing in from time to time. I know her interests lie in some of the historical parts of Nottingham, whether it be cemeteries or buildings or something of the sort. So I've encouraged her to come back and participate as a member of the public if there are subdivisions or improvements that are being planned that that could weigh in. Having some of her expertise would be great. So I do want to just take this second to thank her for her service. And that also allows me a plug for anybody else in the public that is interested in serving on the planning board as an alternate. We have up to 3 alternate seats, and Robert Davies is one of them, the only one now. But we now can, select 2 more, or I'm not sure that we're limited to 3, but we've usually been around 1 or 2. So it would be great if we had 2 or 3 alternates. So anybody in the public that's interested, just reach out to Joanna at the planning office. And if you are semi-interested, I'm happy to have a conversation with you on what it entails. So just please reach out to us. I know there's comments that happen on social media and other outlets. This is a way to participate and really affect how your community grows around you. So it's a good part to play as a civic duty. All right, so we've got the members ready. What are we going? We're gonna just jump right in, I guess. Anybody, I just do wanna mention, so Jen, was James gonna be on as well? No, okay. That's fine. Anybody have anything else before, any members, before I jump into the public hearings? Okay. So the first public hearing is case 21-003 SIT. This is an application from Tanny DeFrancesco, trustee of Kubota Trust, for approval of a watercross event. This has been requested by the applicant to be continued until July 14th. So at this time, I'd just ask for a motion for continue for the July 14th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to extend case 21-003-SIT to July 14th, 7 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Eaton. Any discussion? I do want to mention to the public that if they are interested in listening to this watercross case, this is all we'll be doing for this evening. We'll just be voting a continuance that was requested by them to the July 14th. I don't believe any further notice will go out to abutters. So you are, by this meeting and the continuance, notified that the meeting will be on July 14th, 2021.
So we're not in, this is Buzz, we're not in any violation of timelines on this one, right?
We are not. It was a continuance requested by them, but also all of the timeline thresholds are, I guess, not valid currently during the executive order.
Ah.
So, but we wouldn't be, even if an executive order was not there, we would not be in threat of that timeline. So let me just do a roll call vote of the members for continuance of this case. Ed Veal.
Yes.
Ian McKinnon.
Yes.
Gary Anderson.
Yes.
Tyler Eaton.
Yes.
Charlene Anderson.
Yes.
Robert Davies.
Yes.
Okay, did I miss anybody? And Dirk, yes. Okay, motion carries. That will be continued. Thank you. Let's go into the next case, which is case 20-008 SPR. We don't have those too often, but here it is. Applicant is requesting an extension for a temporary change of use that was approved by this board on October 14th, 2020. It originally had an expiration date, which was June 1st, 2021. This application is for the Northwood Veterinary Hospital. They did request a site plan review for a temporary change of use to be able to rent the property for originally 4 months while their permanent location is being renovated, and that is in Northwood. Their renovations are taking longer than they expected and that we originally provided an approval for. I don't know if anybody remembers that meeting, but they thought it would be a lot quicker than the 4 months. And we just said, well, why don't we just extend it out and give you 4 months? And they were pretty confident that that would happen. Well, their contractor wasn't at that meeting. So, yeah, so it's right on 120, or right on Route 4 in Northwood. It is progressing. It looks like a great little building for them, or a big building. But we do have a timeline that was expired, or expires on June 1st. So they want to make sure that they're okay for the next 4 months. So I guess would we accept this application since this is a extension? I mean, it's not a new application, it's an extension of an existing one.
It's just an extension of an existing.
Okay, so all it would take is a discussion and vote.
Correct.
All right, public meeting?
This is a public meeting.
Good point. Okay, so is there any, I guess, comments or discussion from the board about this request? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to grant the extension for 4 months.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to extend the approval or approve the request for a 4-month extension for the site plan review approval for case number 20-008-SPR.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Buzz. There's a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. Ed Veal,
Yes.
Ian McKinnon,
Yes.
Tyler Eaton,
Yes.
Robert Davies,
Yes.
Charlene Anderson,
Yes.
Gary Anderson,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So that's unanimous. They'll have that extension. Okay, thank you. The next case is case 20-003 SUB. This is continued from September 23rd, 2020. This is an application for a 14-lot subdivision from Robert DeBerto with the possibility of 2 new roads to be constructed off of Mitchell Road, a scenic road in Nottingham. Property is identified as tax map 7, lot 1N, and is located off of Mitchell Road in Nottingham. So this being a catch-up, since we haven't heard anything really since September, I think it's probably appropriate that we get a briefing from the applicant's engineer to bring us up to speed. I do know that the most up-to-date materials has been at least cursory reviewed and have some comments from our SRPC. But if Mr. Barry, you could just walk us through what has been updated and we'll go from there.
Okay, great. So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Christopher Barry with Barry Surveying and Engineering. Just a brief overview of the timeline of the project. Last September, or actually a little bit prior to that, there was some discussion about needing a variance to cross through some jurisdictional wetland areas. That was ratified by the board, and we asked that our application be tabled until such time as we received a variance and came back. We're basically ready to come back to the board. What we didn't want to do is just continue, to this frustrating no end until we were really ready to come back with a formal resubmission to you. So that process has taken place. We have received the variance to cross through the 2 wetland areas that we previously had discussed with the board. approximately 6,000 square feet of disturbance. And then after we received those variances, we took some time to really evaluate a lot of the board's comments. Since then, I think you can see in my narrative to the board, we've made quite a bit of change to primarily the two entrances of the project and how that affects the rest of the site and the rest of the project. And then we have some updates for the Division of Historical Resources and our archaeological consultants, and they've been doing some work on the site as well. And so it took us a bit to make the changes that we thought were necessary between the time we got the variance and in our submission on May 5th. So I'll just start. This is a proposed 14-lot subdivision. We have two frontage lots on Mitchell Road. There's one joint driveway at the common boundary line. And then we have a proposed 12-lot subdivision arranged with a looping road and a small proposed cul-de-sac. So some of the changes that we've made here at the entrance, this roadway was further down slope, here more at the apex of the curve. This is really a low-lying area along the roadway. Originally, we placed it there because it's good for sight distance, though the new position that we've chosen has adequate sight distance as well. And by picking this road upslope on Mitchell Road, we're able to come into the project at a much higher elevation and basically use the remainder of the land for the stormwater detention and treatment cells that would be required in this area. The prior design had sort of a dual system where we had treatment on the lower side of the roadway and a large cut for a detention pond on the upper side of Stone Gray Drive on lot N1 N-2. And so that the board astutely brought up a couple of comments. The first is that this is a scenic road, and so the amount of disturbance that was required for that type of design really it wasn't in keeping with the scenic road aspect that is really in the subdivision regulations. And so by moving the road upslope, we're able to, we still have a small cut slope here, but it's been reduced pretty drastically, and it only encompasses really the front setback required on the lot. And then the same stormwater detention system is essentially shifted down slope. And by doing that, and I can show you on the grading plans, we're able to flatten that out considerably. So the pond that is required in that area is not nearly as high. And we're able to push it away from Mitchell Road. And by doing that, we're also able to provide some landscaping at the front side of that. And so in doing that, the whole front of this project entrance, I think, has been cleaned up in the amount of disturbance that is proposed in that area. Additionally, there are some plans at the back of the plan set that show some replacement of stone wall in this area. We do have some small amount of stone wall that would be removed as part of the cut on Stone Gray Drive, and that is proposed to be reset along areas where there is none currently. Moving up Mitchell Road, currently Mitchell Road, the cross-section is about 20 feet of gravel surface, but the road specifically on our side of the project, or on our side of the Mitchell Road, there's oftentimes basically a vertical face in the cut slope. There are some trees between the cut slope and the stone wall, but because the project is proposing work in this general area, we've proposed to increase the swale line capacity in that location, grab that stormwater and send it to our treatment cell here at the bottom of the slope. In doing that, there would be some tree removal, and I noted that in the plans, both by plan but also by photograph. Many of those trees are ash trees that have been infected by the borer, and so they're really not too worth saving. And we're proposing some additional plantings to ensure that that buffer is re-enhanced once that grading takes place. And we've walked that particular area with the road agent, and agrees that that improvement would be a really good benefit to the roadway infrastructure for Mitchell Road. Another aspect of the project, originally we located this John Smith stone on site, and there's very little information about that stone. And so we hired Victoria Bunker, who's an archaeologist, to provide some guidance on that. And she did a review of not only the stone, but also the entire project site. And her review of the project site found that this is really the area of concern. After her initial review, she asked us if she could proceed with what's known as a phase 1 study, which is a little bit more in depth than a research review. And in so doing, asked us if we would permit her to do some ground penetrating radar. That took place on site by Horizons Engineering through Victoria Bunker. And they found what they believe are two pretty distinguishable graves at the footstone of the large stone that's there. And through the use of the ground penetrating radar, they were able to basically create an outline for us of the sensitive area for that particular stone. Now we go out, we've gone out and survey located those flags, and then we apply a 25-foot buffer to that as if it were a well-documented cemetery. And so that the homeowners in the future understand that there's a restriction in that area. We're proposing an easement be placed at the 25-foot limits, and that easement be documented with easement bounds that also be documented in the deeds for the two proposed lots. And then there's a series of construction notes that Victoria recommended, and eventually Division of Historical Resources agreed was appropriate for the site. We've placed them in the plan set so that during construction, the best management practices be used if a contractor is working in that area. Lastly, for that, we are proposing that as part of that same easement and as part of the driveway easement for the two lots, that an easement for visitors to come and basically document how somebody would come and visit the stone if they so desired in the future, how they would access that moving forward. Because right now it's pretty ambiguous. There's no known easement to it or documented easement to it. So I think it would be nice to have an actual way to go and visit the stone. Additionally, because these lots front on a scenic road, I thought it was appropriate that the applicants of the future lots basically have a 50-foot no-cut buffer applied to the front of this lot. So the only trees that would be removed would be for access into the site and then for the developable site itself, but the front 50 feet would remain wooded and vegetated. Part of the stone wall for that driveway access needs to be removed, and we're proposing that some of that wall be relocated to the southern part of the project here, which I'll get to in a few moments. So once we move the entrance to Stone Gray Drive and sort of realign some of these lots, you can see that the building envelopes on these lots are much less encumbered. We were able to redesign the drainage system to remove an upslope detention cell here in the buffer. And so we only have one gravel wetland here in the buffer area on the lower side. We're also able to redesign the wetland crossing and the road alignment here at the intersection of Lipizan and Stone Gray so that we could capture all of that stormwater and get that into the same treatment cell. And so we were drastically able to reduce some of the detention cell that was here in the buffer and encovering lot. I guess that's lot 11. Most of Lipizan Drive remained the same. We probably played with the profile just a little bit through here to see how we could get the stormwater from Lipizan down into this gravel wetlands. And then the backside of Lipizan, that stormwater is captured and sent to a small gravel wetlands off the back of the site also. So all of the lots in the subdivision have been improved in that a lot of the stormwater features that previously were designed on them have now been removed. This infiltration pond is still required, and so we've actually moved that back upslope a bit, and is now not quite so close to the wetland area and nearly out of the buffer. We do have some of the berm that's in the buffer, but the actual treatment cell itself, we were able to pull back out quite a bit. Moving on to the southern portion of Stone Gray Drive, station 20+00 approximately. We originally designed this entrance. There's a slope that comes down Mitchell Road, and then most of Mitchell Road through this area is pretty flat, but this is probably a 6 or an 8% slope right through here. The drainage in that area is also very, very poor. There's very little ditch line on either side of the roadway. And so what we're proposing there is, because of the steeper grade, we're proposing to widen Mitchell Road with a widened shoulder, and then proposing to increase the swale capacity through there. That requires that we install a back grade or a back slope onto our site, and would require that the stone wall be removed and then reset or replaced in place. And so we've designed the grading through there so that it's a 3-to-1 slope to basically a bench where the stone wall would sit back on top, and then grading would continue back onto the lot. So that we could respect, again, sort of a 50-foot no-touch buffer. That area that's now been regraded would have plantings also installed in that area to keep with the scenic road aspect that we're trying to enhance in the area. I mentioned before, this gravel wetlands, we've been able to redesign that pretty considerably. The original design thought was all of the storm water that comes down and across Sutton Street comes down and it enters the top of the wetland here. We were originally capturing that flow, putting it into a catch basin, and getting it into a gravel wetland for some attenuation and treatment. The problem is that area is so small for that use that the smaller events, it was probably mildly effective, but during the larger events, it was really good just going right over the top of the spillway and right back out into the wetland again. And so what we've decided to do is disconnect those two flows. So the flow from the cross culvert under Sutton would come down through our new swale line, cross under a cross culvert under our roadway, and then enter the wetland as it does today. All of the new impervious surface from the top of the hill, the high point of the road, here where my cursor is, all the way down to the entrance to the roadway, all of that new impervious surface, to include the house lot stormwater, would be captured in a culvert device and sent to the gravel wetlands. And so we're able to do a number of things by doing that. The device is made a little bit smaller, not drastically smaller, but a little bit smaller. And we moved it further away from Mitchell Road before to try and make all of the piping work and the elevations work. This was tucked really, really close to Mitchell Road. And I think some of the planning board members pointed out that there was some overflow ponding that was actually taking place in the swales, and it just really wasn't a very effective design. And so this design pushes all of that away from Mitchell Road and fully treats the stormwater from the new impervious surface, and allows us to reset some of the stone wall that we would be removing from the northern part of the project to the southern part of the project. And again, provide some landscaping and some buffering there so that the pond is not quite so obvious moving forward. As part of the project, we required the Division of Historical Resources to review the site. Again, they requested a phase 1 analysis, as did Victoria. We've now submitted that to DHR and have received an approval from them. We've also received an approval from New Hampshire Fish and Game to move forward with the project through final permitting. And a few things to point out as part of their review and approval. The first is that the box culvert that's proposed, that would be instituted with some natural bottom characteristics. Same with the culvert device here under Lipizan. A few other best management practices, such as deep sumps in the outlet structures. Those have been removed so that if any critter, climbs up the pipe or falls in, they're able to get out of the structure and they don't die in the structure itself. Sloped granite curbing as opposed to vertical granite curbing where it's appropriate. Things of that nature that we implement in most of our project sites, as well as natural fiber products. No plastic products are to be used as part of sediment erosion control on the site due to the sensitivity of the area. The last piece of that is Nottingham has a 50-foot and a 75-foot to very poorly drained setback to those natural features. And then so what we've worked with Fish and Game on is not only are the center wetlands obviously not proposed to be touched, but all of the setbacks that would ordinarily be required by the town, those actually be buffers. And so no homeowner would be allowed to go in and clear them with the exception of dead diseased trees. And we document that quite thoroughly on an easement plan, as well as in each one of the homeowner's deeds. And then the last line of defense is we would install, and you can see this on the easement plan we provided, we would install boundary or easement bounds at the corners where all of the buffers cross the proposed boundary lines, at every turning point in the easement. And then between those, we install placards in either trees or on posts, mostly on trees, that basically say Town of Nottingham wetland buffer, so that we have a legal document that binds the owners in the future to not cutting the trees. And then we essentially create a visual, I don't want to say barrier, but a visual exclamation on site so that they know that that area is not to be touched and that there's no confusion in the future. And they're not required in the future to hire to tell them where those are, because they will all have been documented already. As part of the submission, we did supply both Fish and Game as well as the Town of Nottingham a vernal pool analysis from Jack Hayes. He had reviewed the site previously and found no vernal pools. Because we were taking some additional time to redesign some of these aspects of the project, I thought it best to have Jack go out this year during vernal pool season and during the growing season to do a formal review of the entire site, which he's done. And so he submitted that report to both the planning board, but also Fish and Game. Fish and Game has accepted the report and has, again, signed off and permitted us to move forward with final permitting. Our wetland permit had a request for more information, which we answered, and that permit should be forthcoming very shortly. And as the alteration of terrain has also been resubmitted back to that department, and that permit should be coming in shortly as well. I think one of the last things that was discussed at one of the prior planning board meetings was the state of Mitchell Road. And there was some desire for pavement along Mitchell Road. After my assessment with the road agent, I think there's a lot more work that needs to take place on Mitchell Road prior to the installation of pavement. And so I documented those things in my narrative to the board. And to my knowledge, he's accepted the proposals for stormwater improvements as well as maintenance improvements along Mitchell Road as part of an offsite improvement for this project. Additionally, I point out that most likely for Mitchell Road to be paved, there would need to be some engineering design that goes into that. And we've offered our services. We have most of Mitchell Road from a section that's not paved all the way, obviously to our boundary, site boundary, and a little bit further. There really isn't that much further a distance between that point and Smoke Street. And so we've offered our services if the town desires or wants to have their review engineer start looking at improvements on Mitchell Road. We could survey that for them at no cost to the town and provide them the data so that that's another offsite improvement that would be a benefit to Mitchell Road moving forward. There was a request for us to reevaluate our traffic analysis in light of I forget the name of the subdivision, but the big subdivision further up Mitchell Road. We took Jeffrey Dirk's analysis. We applied a ratio of known homes built when we did our traffic counts on Mitchell Road, and then applied a factor to the remainder number of trips estimated to come in our direction. And we then updated our analysis on May 5th on our submission date and supplied that to the board, and found that there was 1 or 2 additional trips generated on Mitchell Road as part of that project that came by both of our front doors for our site. I think the last thing that was discussed was stormwater maintenance. We had originally proposed what I call a pipe end approach. So wherever the stormwater comes off the roadway through the pipe and into the treatment cell, an HOA would be developed to maintain the treatment cells. After talking with the road agent, I've come to learn that the infrastructure that Nottingham has now really isn't conducive to having additional maintenance concerns for a subdivision like this. And so we offered to expand the HOA's responsibility to any of the basins that would be in the roadway. And so that would alleviate him from having to maintain those as part of the treatment system. We've put that in an operations and maintenance manual, which is required both by the town and alteration of terrain. And that would alleviate the responsibility of doing it from the town or the obligation. And they would have the ability in the future, if they so needed, to maintain them. Obviously, that would be part of their infrastructure. They could maintain it, but they would not have the obligation to maintain it. So I guess with that, Mr. Chairman, unless you wanted me to go through my narrative to the board in great detail, I think that about sums up what we've been working on in the last few months.
No, I appreciate it, and I just want to thank you for kind of touching on all of the points that the board has brought up in the past, not only bringing them up, but addressing them in a point where you've made some iterations to make this more fitting to the area. I do agree that a lot of the changes you have made reflect some of the rural character. So I just want to say thank you for listening to this board and to the public and making some of those revisions. So yeah, that and even just the technical ones of shifting a roadway. While it seems easy, it usually isn't. But it looks like you've kind of optimized a lot of the grading here to kind of leave a lot more existing vegetation in place. So that's I just want to note that as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. I do want to just open it up to the board for comments. Any further comments, or if there's some detail specific to something he mentioned as an update. Obviously, there's a huge set of plans and a number of reports. I do want to pass along, before I get it into the board, I do want to pass along that the road agent is in agreement with the plans that are current. And I just want to confirm, Mr. Berry, that any of the construction or changes to that would be incurred on the owner or development of the subdivision site. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yep. It would be part of our project plan and our project plans. Yep.
Great. Thank you. So I'll open it up to the board if there's any other, or if there are comments, and then we'll open it up to the public.
Mr. Chair, I had a couple things I wanted to go through.
Sure.
First, I think I was the one that kind of made some of the comments about the ponds up along Mitchell, and I was glad to see the reconfiguration of both of those systems really just together right away. But also, I think between the resizing, the movement of the road, and some of the proposed vegetation, I think it will really improve the aesthetics of this new proposed road from Mitchell Road. So I was happy to see that. And then I'm glad to see some expansion of the Mitchell Road. I think there's plenty of roads in town that need some new ditching installed, but it's not always easy for the DPW to go around town and do that. So I'm glad to see you included that along most of the frontage on Mitchell Road. And I guess the only question I had, I haven't found it in the plans yet in the notes. You mentioned there was some notes related to the monument cemetery easement. Are there restrictions on regrading within that easement? I know I see that there's a proposed driveway close to it and a house close to it. Are there any limitations to, regrading within it? I assume it needs to remain as is within that.
Yeah, so there's no grading that's allowed within that easement.
Okay.
We do show a driveway that sort of skirts right along the edge of that. And I believe somewhere in these plans, I required my staff to show me a profile of how that would be built.
Yeah.
For this very conversation. You can sort of see it here on this overview grading. And I know one is provided as part of the site distance plans.
I think it's sheet 44.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I see that there looks like there was a profile for that first common drive portion.
Yeah.
And then I guess if you go from there, and it looks like they kind of split off based on the contours.
Right.
It looks like they should be able to avoid, and obviously there can be some tweaks here and there. Okay.
Yeah. So and they're probably not going to. We tend to draw these a little too harsh.
Yeah.
They'll probably be a little more sweeping as they're built on site, and so they probably won't be so close to that easement line. But to answer your direct question, no disturbance allowed in that easement whatsoever.
Okay. Good. Like I said, I think it's good. There's a noticeable improvement to the disturbance level related to the stormwater and stuff. I'm glad to see that some of the redesign helped you consolidate the ponds. So I think overall it was a lot of good improvements.
Thank you.
Any other members with comments or questions?
Yeah, it's Mr. Veal. So thank you, Mr. Barry, I think you summarized a very complex or a lot of detail in a great way. So, and I think it's clarified and alleviated a lot of our prior concerns or things that we had addressed. So we appreciate you listening to the feedback that we gave and incorporating it in this revised plan. So one of the items I had before was like proposal lot 1N-13, and I think a few others had 25% and greater slopes.
Yep.
That amount that's not included in the lot envelope at all, correct?
It is not. No.
Okay.
So all of the 30,000 square foot buildable area calculations do not include the 25% slopes or buffers.
Okay. And have you already gone to the Concom, being on a scenic road? That's usually one of the requirements, is that that you go to the Concom and they provide feedback to this board, which we either utilize or don't utilize.
Yes, we've been to the Conservation Commission on this project. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I thought so, but it's been a bit. So, and then the 25-foot burial buffer. How's that? Is that delineated with any kind of visual, or is it just that you avoid it during construction?
So the visual, that's actually a really good point. The visual on that is we've geometrically determined the easement area around it, and we've provided meets and bounds around that buffer, and we would place easement bounds with caps on them. But much like the wetland buffer that we're proposing, some well-placed placards at eye height would probably be a good idea.
Okay. And there's no improvement of the burial area proposed, right? There's no like fencing or anything like that being proposed, correct?
There's not. No.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not defined well enough for us to try and undertake that type of work.
Yeah, and so I would encourage, that the some kind of visual to help the landowners and future landowners know where that is, at least for a period of time. I think that would be great. And I like the idea of the wetlands buffer that you mentioned. Again, it's hard for people to know, like a landowner, to kind of understand where those are. But when you have some kind of visual clues, I think that's going to be very helpful with, maintaining that area and hopefully eliminating any impact to that area. The only other one I had I guess this is more for the board, is the, I don't know if we did this already, but with the grading, erosion, sediment control plan, there's one item in our subregs that says the board will not accept final calculations that have not been reviewed and approved by the town's engineer. So I don't know if that's happened yet.
Well, we don't have an engineer, a town engineer, and we did not have this out for consultant review.
The original project was reviewed by
CMA.
the third-party engineer, and I think these plans have been sent to.
Joanna's nodding yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they've been sent for review. I have not had any feedback from them.
Okay.
CMA. I can't believe I couldn't think of their name. CMA.
Yep. Yep.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, Ed, then that's valid. Yeah. But that can be, a condition for sure.
Yep. No, that's all I had. Like I said, I went back to my original list and everything, and I think everything was checked off except for those couple things.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
I have
Yeah, this is Buzz.
Good, Buzz.
I have a question on the cul-de-sac. My recollection is that we have not approved a cul-de-sac for a traditional development. We've only approved, in recent past, we've only approved them for conservation developments. So that, in other words, we approved the cul-de-sac in order to save space, not to allow the landowner to get more lots. So that's my comment, my question.
Yeah, I guess I can respond. Yeah, cul-de-sacs could be used in either a conventional or, a cluster type development. The only regulation we have on cul-de-sacs is the length.
Yeah, I think we, because I think we considered that possibly during when we did the update to the subdivision regulations. And at that time, I think it was just incorporated that we could allow them through a waiver, since we had a number of them in town already.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a waiver has been submitted for that, correct?
It has, yeah. So there are, which we can act on in just a little bit. There is a waiver for the cul-de-sac. And one other waiver. I have to look at what that one is.
Yeah, and actually Mr. Barry, actually, that brought up one other thing I had that I forgot to write down. So for Libzan Drive, was it considered, instead of doing a roadway and cul-de-sac and 3 lots, simply doing 2 lots and a shared driveway, which would probably have a lot less impact, a lot less infrastructure maintenance, and all that, was that possibly considered, that it create a shared driveway there instead and just do 2 lots?
Yeah, it was considered. The issue that we run into is any road over a certain length, and it varies as to who's interpreting NFPA 101. Any driveway shared over a certain length has to be basically considered a fire lane. So it has to be 20 feet wide, and it has to have a turnaround on it. And so when you take and you start looking at crossing a wetland with a 20-foot roadway as part of a subdivision, the cost of a driveway once you start looking at all of those things, really add up to the same as a roadway.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to propose a crossing there with access, it might as well be an actual roadway with an actual cul-de-sac, and sort of move in that direction. That's sort of the progression that this took. Originally, there were 2 proposed lots out there with a shared driveway access down a common boundary line. But when you start adding up, what it's going to take to cross through that wetland area and meet NFPA 101, Chapter 18, it really, at the end of the day, it just needed to be a road.
Thank you.
Charlene, did you have some things to add?
Yeah, just really 2 questions, and more just kind of for my own learning, Mr. Berry. You said you said that homeowners association would be formed. How typically does that get created in in a subdivision like this?
So the HOA document and bylaws get drafted. We actually submit them to the town for legal review prior to the signing of the plan. And then they're recorded. And so that by the time these roads are built and the first sale of any lot takes place, each lot is bound at their transaction to be part of the HOA. So you can't have a lot owner say, well, I'm not really part of the HOA. No, every lot in the subdivision is bound by this HOA document, and their deed states that. And then the bylaws and articles require a board be formed. Typically, the developer acts as the board until there's a turnover date. And then once that turnover date takes place, then the members of the HOA they'll pay a small dues, probably yearly in this particular case, because the maintenance really isn't that strenuous. And then there would be the requirement to have somebody inspect the stormwater systems as part of that HOA.
Thank you. And the second question I had to just kind of for my own learning is, I understand this is 14 lot subdivision. So the question of paving Mitchell Road, and I appreciate you willingness to help the town with the survey of Mitchell Road. But, based on your experience, typically what's the size of a subdivision in which, based on your experience, a developer may be willing to improve or work with the town to improve the road?
Well, that's a tough question. I don't know that there's really a size. There's a term, I think I used it a number of times in my letter, rational nexus. And so, let's say this were a dead end road in the middle of, dead end road, and it was 1,000 feet from the closest paved road, and you're the only development off from it. You're the only one generating traffic to it. Your rational nexus may be a larger extent, or to a larger extent, to upgrade that road for your benefit. And so whether you get 2, 20, or 200 lots off from that particular roadway, that's your rational nexus, regardless of whether or not you may be able to afford it or not. And I represent a lot of applicants, and they probably wouldn't be pleased with my synopsis of that. But in this particular case, we have a road that is used by many, many people in town, used by many other subdivisions in town. 14 lots is not a very large project. I think we've demonstrated that it doesn't generate an inordinate amount of traffic. And Mitchell Road cannot simply just be paved. There are a lot of upgrades that need to take place to it before we put pavement on it, or we'd be wasting pavement, essentially. And so my point, and the road agent agreed, was let us help you with getting to that point so that you can put a capital improvements plan together, and then capital improvement funding, and get the road built, reshaped and built the way it should be before it's paved. And because we're here doing work, some of these things are really easy for us to undertake. They're costly, but we're here. It's not like we're mobilizing machinery. And include them not only in the project design, but also in our analysis, so that when this does take place, this project is not impacted, and in fact, it would be helpful. So I don't think it's necessarily the number of lots. It's really the rational nexus test that that you really have to look at. There are other for instance, I did a 2-lot subdivision on a scenic road very recently in the town of Nottingham, and the rational nexus was the sight distance on that road was terrible, not just for the driveway, but also for the horizontal alignment. Again, we were there proposing work in the area. It was a benefit to both the town and the property owner. And so that we felt that rational nexus was met.
Thank you.
I have a quick follow-up. This is more just out of curiosity. Will lots 1N and 1N-1, are they required to be part of the HOA because they are part of this subdivision, even though they don't utilize, say, the road or the stormwater features?
Yes, I would say yes, because the easements that we're going to be encumbering those lots with and encumbering the rest of the subdivision with, those easements actually have to be transferred to an entity, and the entity will likely be the HOA. And so I think it's appropriate for them to be part of that HOA because they are eased by the cemetery easement and the access easements.
Okay, thanks.
Is it common land between the places as well, or?
No common land like in an open space subdivision on this particular project.
And it's Mr. Beal again. Another follow-up question on so reading like the staff comments or review notes, there was a item about application to Barrington, and also reading our own language about cul-de-sacs and reserve space for connections to additional land. There's no proposed connection from this development to adjoining land. Is that correct?
The applicant will likely reserve an easement over the end of Lupizan to the buildable upland that's here in Barrington, because otherwise it's inaccessible. And because we are on a town line, once the town of Nottingham approves, hopefully approves of the project, we would go to Barrington. We're required to do so as part of the state law.
Okay. So, and I guess that would probably also bring back into the question about the like the gravel wetlands that are proposed up in the top of that area where, you know, it's abutting the neighboring town. If there's a impact that results in homeowners in Barrington impacting that, but it's Nottingham's responsibility to take care of it, then, you know, there could be some question there as to how that's handled. But at this time, or I guess if something were to go before for the Barrington side of it, the town of Nottingham would be notified and be able to provide comment at that time. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. The same process applies in reverse. Yep.
Yep.
And the town of Barrington has seen these plans as well, and they provided a letter of, I don't know, have it up here, but it didn't seem like there was impact that they felt warranted further comment at this point.
No, my comment was more about if there's a potential of additional lots coming into, you know, from another town that can be accessed by our town roads, meaning, you know, school buses, it's a different SAU, all those kind of things. You know, I want to make sure that we have a full chance to speak towards that.
Yep.
So I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Barry.
Gary, you've been holding on very patiently.
I have been. I just had one question. Thank you. Mr. Berry, I'm trying to understand, and I know you've been working with the road agent on the subject of Mitchell Road, and I'm just trying to understand. I thought I remembered that there would be grading changes in Mitchell Road, and I'm kind of not understand the plan to see that. So my question really is how much disruption or change is actually planned to happen on Mitchell Road.
So from the entrance of Stone Gray Drive, we'll call that the northern entrance. This is really where there's a vertical face in the road cut. And so we're proposing that that be swaled. And so there's an extension of a shoulder. So Mitchell Road would be widened by a foot or two. And then there would be a 3-to-1 slope into a swale that's about 2 feet deep, and then a 3-to-1 back slope. And that would be cut back up to the existing stone wall. And so that stone wall in that area would not be touched. Then we're proposing some landscaping, trees be planted on the back side of that stone wall. Currently, there's not a whole lot of vegetation there. And so because we're taking down vegetation that's in the town's right of way, we wanted to sort of enhance that area with some visual appeal and some buffering in the future. The profile of Mitchell Road through this section, so from the same intersection headed south, that would be regraded and shaped and provided some cover over a proposed or an upgrade to an existing culvert that's under Mitchell Road. And so that area would have gravels added to it and the profile modified slightly. There would be a small swale installed here. Currently there is none. And that would take place between the stone wall and the roadside edge. So there'd be very little disturbance there. And then the disturbance that would take place on the southern part of the project is a shoulder widening to allow for a better turning movement into Stone Gray Drive. And then the same type of swaling, Gary, but because we're on a steeper slope and because the cut onto our project, there's more of an elevation change there, the back slope extends further. And so that's why I described we'd be taking this wall up and benching it onto a slope and then resetting it so that that slope was a lot less obvious moving forward. And then just some regrading of an outlet swale here to allow for that natural flow pattern to enter the wetland system.
So it's really not a lot of grade changes. It looks like to me, other than the two areas.
Right. They're not drastic. Our initial design, I'll admit, was drastic.
Thank you. Sorry if I made you repeat that. I might have missed it.
Thanks, Gary. Any other board members have a question before I open it up to the public? Okay, let's go ahead and open it up to the public for any testimony. Seeing there's only a few, I will not take it in order of opposition or favor. So if anybody does have a comment in the public, to, for, or against this application, if you can take yourself off mute and state your name, your address, and then your comment. Anybody from the public have a comment?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead. Is it Patricia? I believe your screen has frozen. Is anybody else hearing her?
No, but Patricia, if you can hear us, there's a number on the planning board page you can call in instead if your internet's having a problem. It's 301-715-8592. 301-715-8592. As I realize, if you have internet problems, you can't get to the website. So.
Okay, well, maybe she's going to try and reconnect. Is there any other board or members of the public who would like to make comment? I guess for a last time, I will give Patricia maybe about 30 more seconds or 1 minute to try and reconnect. So at 8:08, if she's not reconnected by then, we'll move on. Okay, well, that's about a minute, so unfortunately we'll have to move on. So at this time I would close the public hearing and then bring it back to the board for discussion, comments, question. I think we kind of went through most of them, but if there is some more comments, we didn't really have public input, so nothing new. Then we will need to also act on the waivers. So there are 2 waivers. I just had them open. So one waiver was a driveway design and construction standards at subdivision regulation section 15.6.4, and that's a request for a 3-to-1 side slope, as Mr. Berry just mentioned about the side slopes for on Mitchell. And the other waiver is the streets and roads subdivision regulation section 9.7.1.1B, and that's a request for construction of a cul-de-sac. So those would have to be voted on, or has to be voted on. So if someone could make a motion on those. Patricia's joining.
Are we back?
Yeah, I'm going to reopen the public hearing. So let me do that. Sorry, you had cut out right as you were trying to ask the question.
Yeah.
So yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, my question was, actually, my husband's question is there going to be any blasting? We're concerned about that, where we're right across the street, you know, as far as our foundations and all that. Is it going to be blasting involved?
Mr. Berry, could you just comment about what you know about the soils that are there and whether there's blasting planned at the moment?
There's no blasting planned at the moment. I just want to look at one profile real quick. The entrance to Stone Gray at the where it enters, there might need to be a little bit of hammering, whereas we are dropping that down a little bit. But as you can see, our test pits are shown here in the profile. So this is the existing grade, and then these are the test pits. And there might need to be a little bit of hammering to get our gravels in, but no known blasting at the moment. We do have a blasting note so that if it is required in the future, that they follow the fire department's rules and regulations for blasting. You would have to be notified as an abutter, and if you so chose, you would have your foundation and potentially your well monitored if blasting were to take place.
Okay, because yeah, that location is like right across the street.
Right.
If they were going to widen the road on the corner of it as well.
Right. Yeah, that's what we're thinking, is that area that you're taking down is potentially ledge.
So we've done test pits in that area, and I don't believe that there's ledge. You're talking about the widening of Mitchell Road. I don't believe that there's ledge in that area.
Okay.
Yeah, but and as he indicated, you know, if there is some blasting, there is a plan that would be put in place.
Okay.
To protect you.
Okay, good, because we're actually putting in a new foundation for an in-law apartment over the next few weeks. So you know, where that's new, I don't know. But
yeah.
Thank you for, at least we'll be notified and.
So if we have to engage a blaster, they will need to notify the town and notify you as an abutter. There's a certain blast radius based on the blast. And at that time, I believe you actually have the option of having them monitor your foundation and monitor your well as part of that that pop or that blast, so that at any point during that process, they can see how it may affect you. But I don't believe there would be any blasting.
Okay. And that effect, if any, would be
taken up with the blaster's insurance company.
okay. Thank you. Okay.
All right, does that satisfy?
I think so.
your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh,
Thank
wait a minute. Maybe one more quick question. How far down, you said you moved that first entrance, how many feet approximately, just so I can get a visual? How much further toward Smoke Street is that first entrance than it was originally? I can't, it's so small.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm thinking. I don't communicate well when I think.
Just roughly, how many?
Yeah, if I had to just off the cuff guess, 60 feet or so.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, all right. Okay. I'll have to check the plan and get a more detailed estimate on that. All right. Thanks. for your
Sure.
answering questions.
Okay.
I also think it's important to note too that the state permits, the AOT permit that they get, requires some provisions around blasting too. So the state would actually have to be notified of that blasting, not just the town.
Yep. Good point. Okay. I'll, unless there's any other public that has thought of something. Okay. I'll close the public hearing then. And now we need to act on the two waivers I mentioned. So if someone could
This
make
is
a motion.
Buzz.
Yes.
This is Buzz. I would like to know if we can act on the two waivers separately, because I'm still not in favor of the cul-de-sac, because it's going to be a public road. It's going to be a potential road into Barrington and another development. And I think that it's going to be more of a burden on them, and it's going to be an asset for the developer. And so I think we ought to look at the two waivers separately.
Okay. Yes, we can look at the two waivers separately.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion if you want me to start that process.
Sure. Thank you.
So I'll separate out for you, Buzz. First motion I'll make is to approve the applicant's waiver request from the driveway design and construction standards, table 1, requiring 3-to-1 slopes on the project. That was a motion to approve the waiver request for that one.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Is that Charlene?
Yep.
Okay. Any discussion? Let me take the roll call. Ed Veal,
Yes.
Ian McKinnon,
Yes.
Tyler Eaton,
Yes.
Robert Davies,
Yes.
Charlene Anderson,
Yes.
Gary Anderson.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, so that's unanimous for that waiver.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the applicant's request for a waiver from the subdivision regulations, section 9.7.1B, streets and roads, for a cul-de-sac. I believe it's specifically for the length. Is that correct? Or just we have a restriction against them properly, right? Yeah. So, a motion to approve that waiver request.
Okay.
Second.
Motion a second from Gary. Any discussion?
Yeah, so it's Mr. Veal. I think Mr. Davies brings up some valid questions, and I'm trying to think, what we have for options before us as a board. We have the applicant's statement as to why a cul-de-sac versus a shared driveway. you know, but should we have that, could we have that reviewed by CMA to see, you know, if really a shared driveway would be more feasible? Because we do also have the option to reduce the number of lots. It's always under our purview, you know, for developments to minimize impacts and such. And I had a second question on there for that I've lost, but I don't know if Mr. Davies can expound upon, you know, his part of it, or.
I'm not sure having CMA review it would be of benefit, because really this is, it's a cost ratio. How feasible cost-wise is it to have two lots with that really long driveway? And only the developer can run those numbers of whether a third lot makes that feasible and two lots don't. So there's a real market analysis versus an engineering analysis, in my opinion.
And what was there language? Am I mistaken? Was there language proposed by the applicant that these roads shall remain private? I feel like that was somewhere mixed in, but I could be wrong.
No, I believe, and Mr. Barry, you can correct me, but it was the intent of these roads would, once approved and built, they would be town roads.
Right. So again, then you get additional road frontage that's potentially plowed and an extra culvert that needs to be maintained. Versus if it's a shared driveway, all that expense goes on to the landowner. So.
Thanks, Ed.
Okay. I guess, is there other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess my thought, the 2 versus the 3 lots. So the current configuration, we have a 20-foot roadway, a shared driveway crossing this wetland. I don't know if Mr. Berry touched upon this, but probably still, you know, might be a couple feet narrower, but would really require similar impacts to the wetland, but have a similar construction cost, you know, cost per linear foot of road. And also that shared driveway would still need to be approximately the same length total as what this cul-de-sac roadway is proposed to be, which would present difficulty, you know, whether it was fire, ambulance. What I like about this configuration is, yes, it adds a third lot. I would say it's probably a similar impact for a wetland crossing, but it provides a full cul-de-sac around this. So yes, there's a third lot. My guess is the reason the third lot is helping cover the additional pavement costs and road costs, but I think from a public safety access perspective, the cul-de-sac provides great access to these 3 homes. And then obviously you have Stonegray Drive, which is a open loop.
And I do know in the past when we've had cul-de-sacs and when issues of length came into play, the fire department would comment on those and provide some input. And in this case, they did not. They didn't make any comment about the cul-de-sac.
No, actually, they did. I think Joanna sent something to us.
Yeah, they did.
Fire.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please correct me.
Yeah, and I can pull it up and read it if that would be helpful.
Yeah, sorry.
Bear with me.
However, I think the comments would probably most likely be much different if there was no cul-de-sac and it was a shared driveway, as Ian pointed out.
I guess, I mean, the length of it, that if it was shared driveways, I mean, again, not knowing the full design standard of it in the NFPA code and such, but, you know, I think it's a little over 200 feet, about 200 feet to the 50-foot buffer, wetlands buffer. So if it went just beyond that, you know, I'm guessing the house lots would possibly, the proposed locations of the dwellings could potentially be moved. Again, a couple of feet narrower when you have a pretty significant wetland area, and also the potential then to eliminate the additional gravel wetlands that would be in the back. That's several hundred square feet of paved surface that could be potentially eliminated. And then the supplemental impacts of that of, salting and sanding during winter maintenance.
So
And
Charlene,
I don't know
I just pulled the fire department's comments from May 25th, and it didn't have anything on the.
Yeah, you're right. I thought I had read something about, and as always, like they don't want, but yeah, in this letter, it's not. They did not mention it.
Yeah, it's just so the letter just indicates that the cisterns be installed to town regulations, and they do recommend sprinkling houses. It's a recommendation.
And also in regards to the length of cul-de-sac, a lot of times towns have restrictions on the length of cul-de-sacs based on the NFPA, and that's oftentimes driven by kind of an industry standard in terms of hose lengths. They tend to only want so many hoses attached especially when you're attaching to a hydrant. In the case of Nottingham, we always need a tanker to be at the scene of a fire. So there won't be any hose lines that need to be laid up Lipizan. So whether it's a shared driveway or a cul-de-sac, there's going to have to be a tanker getting into a house for the fire. But in the cul-de-sac, that access, a fire truck can get in and get out in a fire situation. So it provides, essentially much better access for fire. God willing, there's no fires, but a shared driveway, that truck's gonna have to back all the way out. I doubt there's gonna be the ability for a fire truck to turn around if it's a private driveway.
And I don't think I've ever seen a fire scene with one fire truck.
Yeah, and I don't think we want 5 tanker trucks lined up in a driveway. It's just my personal opinion in terms of public safety, and that's usually the driving force. Is cul-de-sacs improve the ability for fire apparatus to get in and out of the site.
Right.
So then lastly, I think it may help the board too, as we act on waivers, to go back to our subregs and read section 11.1, which is general waiver provisions that outline when a waiver should be or can be considered, and kind of helps give that language. And there's actually some criteria that are 4 criteria that it lists. So I don't know if it'd be easier to kind of go through those 4 as a board, just so that they're out there and everybody can make their own decision.
I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, do you want me to go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you have them in front of you, that'd be great.
Yeah. Do you want me to read the paragraph ahead of it too, that talks about the general waiver provisions themselves?
Sure.
All right. So where the board finds that extraordinary hardships, practical difficulties, or unnecessary and unreasonable expense would result from strict compliance with these regulations, or if the purpose of these regulations may be served to a greater extent by an alternative proposal, it may approve waivers to these regulations. The purpose of granting waivers under the provisions of these regulations shall be to assure that an applicant is not unduly burdened as opposed to merely inconvenienced by said regulations. In approving waivers, the board may impose such conditions as it deems appropriate to substantially secure the objectives of the standards or requirements of these regulations. A petition for any such waiver shall be submitted in writing by the applicant on forms supplied to the board with application for board review. The petition shall state fully the grounds for the waiver and all the related facts relied upon by the applicant. The board shall not approve any waivers unless a majority of those present and voting shall find that all of the following apply. And here are your 4 items. 1, the granting of the waiver will not be detrimental to public safety, health, or welfare, or injurious to the to other property, and will promote the public interest. 2, the waiver will not in any manner vary the provisions of the Nottingham zoning ordinance or official maps. 3, such waivers will substantially secure the objective standards and requirements of these regulations. And 4, a particular and identifiable impediment exists or a specific circumstance warrants the granting of a waiver. Factors to be considered in determining the existence of an impediment shall include, but not limited to, the following: topography, site features, geographic location of property, size, magnitude of projects being evaluated, protection of environmental and natural resources is accomplished through the granting of the waiver. That's it.
Okay, well, that's great to hear that. So while that sinks in, we have a motion and a second. The motion is to approve the waiver for cul-de-sac. So I'll do a roll call. Ed Veal,
No.
Ian McKinnon,
Yes.
Tyler Eaton,
Yes.
Robert Davies,
No.
Charlene Anderson,
No.
Gary Anderson,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So that waiver passes.
Thank you for consideration on both of those.
Yep. Let's go back to the next step.
Tim's trying to call you.
Okay, so now I guess with the waivers approved, the reviews complete, we do need to act on this approval, provide conditions. Either we're going to, approve, deny, continue to a date certain. So there are a couple of approvals or conditions, I should say, that should be included into that motion. And that should be that the plan copies with professional seals and signatures be provided, the original Mylar with professional seals and signatures. There are a number of state permits. Although there's a curb cut marked here, but that should not be. There is no state permit requiring a curb cut. So that would not be a condition. Subdivision approval, state subdivision approval, state dredge and fill, and alteration of terrain. I think everything with the exception of alteration of terrain has been received. Is that correct, Mr. Berry? Are we just waiting on the alteration of terrain permit?
Both wetlands and alteration of terrain, those are the
Okay.
two outstanding ones.
All right, thank you. And also is the town engineer's acceptance as a condition, and the homeowners association documents be submitted to the town for legal review.
I have one other question, Dirk. I didn't know if we wanted to include was the route survey of Mitchell Road.
Yep, that would be a good condition, even though it was offered, that the existing conditions survey once, and maybe let's not call it existing conditions because once you improve it, it's going to be different, but that the survey would be provided by the applicant to the town for use of future Mitchell Road improvements. So I'd be looking for someone to make a motion.
It's Mr. Veal. I just have one more question. The applicant had mentioned, though, that there was, for the Lipizan at the end of that cul-de-sac, that there was the intent of the owner was to potentially reserve out some space for a connection onto abutting land. So is that shown on these plans at all? And is the frontage that's there now sufficient to allow that?
We'd have to look at the easement plan if there's an easement currently there.
Yeah, we don't currently show that on the end of Lipizan. We haven't really nailed down where the best position for that might be, just because we haven't really discussed access into Barrington, I guess, that thoroughly. But I guess with that said, if and when that does take place, we have to make sure that it doesn't impact either one of the lots from a building standpoint. Which is, I guess, when, again, you'd be notified as a town in the abutting town to review that if and when that actually does take place.
Okay, so then we should receive a comment or copies of all easements as a condition.
Basically, as it's designed now, it's not, even though like our cul-de-sac requirements say they should be designed as such to allow access to abutting lands. It's not planned for at this time. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's not platted. That's fair. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Anybody want me to repeat all of those conditions or make it easier on somebody to make a motion?
I think I got it.
Okay, Ian, thank you.
So I'll make a motion to approve case number 20-003-SUB with all conditions previously described by the chair and also outlined on the latest SRPC review memo.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Ed Veal.
Sorry, trying to get my computer off mute. Yes.
Ian McKinnon.
Yes.
Tyler Eaton. Robert Davies.
Yes.
Charlene Anderson.
Yes.
Gary Anderson.
Yes.
And chair votes yes. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Berry. And there'll be, a number of conditions to clean up prior to full approval.
Thank you very much. Just because I don't remember from town to town, what is the length of the approval that the town of Nottingham has? Is it 90 days or 60 days? I'm sorry, 90 days or 6 months. And if it is only 90 days, if we could discuss basically a longer conditional approval time period.
That's a good question. I don't have it off the top of my head. I don't believe it's 90 days. I think it is longer. I thought it was like a year.
It's a good question because we realistically should be, and we always kind of fail to do so, setting like sunset dates on our approvals.
Yep.
But there is a date in I'm trying to find it in the subdivision regs. I'm not going to find it in the zoning regs.
Mr. Chair, I'm seeing subdivision regulations section 11.2 number 2. The applicant shall, unless otherwise specified within the approval, the applicant shall have 12 months to comply with the conditions of approval and have the plans signed by the board. If not met within 12 months, the conditional approval shall lapse unless an extension is agreed upon.
Okay, that's more than plenty. That's great.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Thanks again for everybody's input. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And keep us informed on the project. Really appreciate it.
Will do. Have a good night now.
Yep. All right. Let's go back to the agenda. So we have public meeting. I guess I'd ask if there is any public that would like to talk about anything in general. We do have kind of I'll call it an open mic. If you're interested in bringing up a conversation that would be germane to this board. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to staff and board member updates. This is a time where everybody gets to check back in and see what they've done since the last time we had a meeting, if there was any action items or if there are updates on their subcommittees or any updates in general. Let me go to Gary first.
I usually just kind of pull something out of the latest news from Stratford Regional, and so figured I'd mention the fact that recently the Metropolitan Transportation Plan was completed at Stratford Regional, and that's for the fiscal year 2021, and that includes a lot of stuff, but a lot of work went into that. You can bet on it. So if anybody wanted to take a peek at it, you can get an idea of the outreach and the different transportation packages and housing and jobs and stuff like that that's being worked on. So figured I'd mention that one.
Great, thank you. Tyler, do you have a Board of Selectmen update?
Yeah, we met on Monday the 17th. And approved manifest, payroll manifest and accounts payable. Signed boards, again, budget nothing, 300, they're still working on the celebration, and Marston property, they're doing stuff out there. Chris gave a report, and basically he was talking about they're having an open house for Gunnar Foss on June 21st, and we had assessing, we had veteran credit, intent to cut, report to cut, disabled exemption, and Chris talked about the American Rescue Act, Rescue Plan Act. That's a work in progress still. Also, the Conservation Commission easement monitoring. Chris will address this, and he'll get the board involved if needed. And COVID protocols, the board, we said we're going to follow the CDC guidelines, and that was it.
Okay, great. Ian, do you have any updates?
Nothing for me.
Charlene?
Nothing from me.
Ed?
No, I mean, I know the town has been selling some town-owned properties, and not to get into any specifics, but I imagine if any use of them is to occur, they'd come before the planning board for site plans and such.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
When I sent that email out today, I just wanted to, that I just got it myself, so.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful.
I think it's great. The Board of Selectmen has been, moving forward with that, with a bunch of properties in town. That's excellent. But no other updates for me.
Buzz, do you have any updates?
Nope, I'm all set. Actually, I've got a question. Are any of the boards in town meeting in person yet?
Select board is.
So the select board, yeah, I think the executive order is likely to lapse. Is that going to be on the 31st or June 1st or something, or later?
Friday, the 28th.
Friday, the 28th.
That's when the emergency declaration expires.
Yeah.
So it all depends on what happens tomorrow, Friday. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe it's, in the near future, we'll get back to meeting in person. I think it would be helpful for this board and the public if we were to be able to maintain some online presence, of having meeting components online, to allow for public to join us. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but that's one of my wishes, because I think we've seen definitely an uptick of people joining the meeting and public participating with this being online, and more so than in person. You know, the commitment of getting in your car and coming down to town hall, while it's not significant, it is easier to turn on your computer and listen in the background, and you get more informed, and you can kind of wait for, you know, your item on the agenda to come up. And yeah, so I'm hoping that there's some combination of that.
Yeah, and I guess I might go back to Tyler. I don't know if the town administrator, if Chris or the select board has kind of thought about any way to do hybrid things, because like the chair just mentioned, it's been, I think it's helpful when both components are available, because you have some people that have a very difficult time leaving a house. So it would just open up participation potentially.
Yeah, I think we're open for that, and we're finding out.
I don't know if our technology is there at this time.
We're finding out though, when we go to the meetings, I mean, especially during the summertime, I mean, it's awful hard to even find a parking spot with all the baseball and all that stuff going on. So,
Right.
Mr. Chair, on that topic, I have a couple boards that I actually present to. Most of them are in Maine, but they actually have instituted a hybrid. I actually have one coming up. I'd be happy to reach out to the city planner in one particular town. She probably could run me through what she does, but they've been doing it for almost a month and a half, 2 months now, where they have in person and I believe Zoom. But I just have to double check. I know there's different platform styles for Zoom, but I know it's being done.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some equipment necessary in the room that we're going to be in. So whether, you know, the IT infrastructure is there in our town, I have no idea.
Yeah, I can, I'm sure she'd be happy to run me through like any upgrades they had to do, or if what they had to do to make their system compatible.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even have Wi-Fi in our town hall.
Well, that might be, well,
that's probably security.
I should say, we did our, when we interviewed for the chief of police, I mean, we did that with, you know, some people were there and some weren't. So Tony can get it going.
So with the lapsing of this, do we have to plan to be in person for the next meeting unless otherwise by Friday something is instituted, or is there an exception, like a period of when we have to transition?
Haven't heard anything about a transition period being offered. It would be lovely if there was, because you know, as you can imagine, that one of the biggest challenges is notices, and we need to be able to give people fair notice of when and where a meeting will, or a hearing will be held. So that's I think the magic trick here. So,
okay. Jen, while you have the floor, do you have any updates that you might have? When's Steph coming back, or?
I know. She's gone. We're feeling it. So just in terms of general updates, from the Stratford Regional Planning perspective, I will be posting Steph's position to hire somebody new. So hopefully I will have that posted next week. As in terms of general updates from SRPC, we are tomorrow we will be sending out our announcements for our annual meeting in kind of the theme of a lot of what has been happening. We are going to have a series of panelists that will speak to kind of project readiness. So building that pipeline of community development projects. So how do you come up with those, what do you need to have for information on hand so that you as a community are prepared when expected or unexpected funding sources become available. One of the things we've seen recently is a kind of a big infusion of funding and the return of earmark requests and a big mad rush for dollars that are available. So
yeah, great, thank you. Joanna, do you have any updates? No. I'm going to do another plug here, and that's for people to go out and vote. So June 8th is our town voting. The planning board has 2 warrant articles up right now. That's Article 2, which is in favor of adopting a new ordinance to protect Nottingham streams. And Article 3, which is to amend our wetland conservation area to create a conditional use permit for non-critical wetland disturbance. So both of those were unanimously posted and voted by the planning board. So I guess I would encourage a positive vote for that from, I guess, town members.
And Derek, it's Ed again, Mr. Veal. 2 quick things with that. The conditional use permits, we'll want to make sure that we have that on our probably our next agenda to make sure we finalize that. So it's ready for if that does get approved. Even if it doesn't, we have conditional use permit language already in our zoning. We just don't have a conditional use permit. So I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that. I think we're just working on the final draft of it. And then I'd mentioned at one of the prior meetings, our current frontage, the way our frontage is written, there's nothing like other towns have about, arcs basically. So, or if it abuts 2 streets, like how you count frontage. And I think we should, it's not something that's been on our agenda before, but I think it's something we probably should consider. Because again, if you're getting into cul-de-sac situations and curves, the 200 feet of frontage is a lot different in a curve than it is on a straight line. Same thing if you're on a corner lot, you're counting frontage possibly in 2 streets. So I think it's something we shouldn't lose sight of, and maybe should consider putting on the agenda for this year if it's quick and easy. That was quick and easy. That hasn't really happened yet, but we always think it will be.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents on it anyway.
Okay, good point. Okay, well, let me go back to the agenda unless anyone has anything else to talk about on updates. So the last thing would be minutes. Joanna's saying no. No minutes. Okay.
I had one question, Ed reminded me of it with the conditional use. Joanna, you sent out, I think I'm looking at it, it was like back around the 17th, you had sent out, I guess, an updated draft, right? We'd moved some stuff around, reduced, I think, a couple pages. Okay.
You're muted, I think.
Your microphone's not coming through, but I saw a yes.
Yes, but I have not received any feedback.
Okay,
so you're expecting some feedback from the document that was sent out on the 17th. Is that when it was, Ian?
Yeah, so
okay.
I've looked through it, and it had to do with a lot of the wording in terms of trying to avoid yes/no questions. The only thing I think I see is on page 5, and it's related to, I think you have it highlighted, Joanna, because there's a reference to section 20, because I think this was taken from, this might be from Stratum or another one. But it's kind of the last, it's kind of just a general bold statement at the end of the conditional use that refers to the planning board having the authority to waive the general requirements, blah, 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 that, and may grant a special permit to construct a sewage disposal system. I think that, I don't think we have anything provisions to grant a special permit or a conditional use related to sewage. So I think that paragraph's that's the only comment I have is, I think that can be removed because it looks like there might have been more after that on whatever town this was from.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So
remove that entire bold section?
That little bold, yeah. So essentially you'd have point number 5 or point number 5 that they have to, for economic advantage. And then it would, I guess, essentially be the end of the application and go into the declarative statement with signatures.
Okay.
So I think we're proposing the conditional use for the wetlands. And then I think is the only other place we have a conditional use permit spelled out in the zoning ordinance related to open space developments. I mean, Okay. So that was my only comment. I know, just because I know it's the only highlighted item left on your permit. There's just that bold mini paragraph can just be removed.
Okay.
Joanna,
Everything else looked
I
good.
don't think you sent that to me, so when you get a chance, if you could.
Will do.
Tell you what, if you want to just make that minor change that Ian had and recirculate it
Yeah.
to the board members, and then we will have a date. What's the next meeting? So we do
June
need, there
9th.
was a little bit of confusion on meeting dates, right?
Yeah, it's June 9th.
So the vote is on June 8th. June 9th, are we allowed to have business, just general business only?
Yes, but you won't have new board members.
Okay,
The new board members will be in place on the 23rd with giving everybody time to be sworn in.
okay. And that's fine. My point is, let's have those, any final comments by the June 9th meeting, so we can then have that ready to go with the June 8th vote.
Yeah, and June 9th is a regular meeting. But
Yeah.
even though it's a weird, like, kind of lame duck session, but it's a full meeting.
Correct, with one case to be heard.
Okay.
So my question would be, now after the election, we usually have an appointment of committee board members.
Mm-hmm.
And so what meeting will we be doing that?
It'll be the second meeting in June.
Second,
That's up for June 23rd.
23rd.
So that's why, yeah, June 9th is a regular meeting, even though the election has occurred. The same members, and then June 23rd would be if there was any change in membership, and then the election of officers, bylaws, all that fun stuff.
Yep. Well, and we have to take into account our bylaws too. So actually, we had some previous discussions about those bylaws. We may want to relook at those before we vote and accept them in. I don't remember the purpose, but I'll read through my notes.
Joanne, I don't think our bylaws are online on our planning board page. So I don't know if you can, not to give you another thing on your plate, but if you could re-forward those to everybody ahead of time, that'd be really helpful.
Okay, I thought they were put on there, but I will definitely do that. Huh, okay.
All right, is everybody satisfied that we've talked about everything tonight that needs to be talked about?
Yeah.
I think there's one more thing we need to talk about, and that's how loud Ed's frogs are.
Oh, sorry. You should hear the peepers instead.
Yeah, the peepers.
Pea frogs now are getting
I think it's awesome. And every time you speak, I hear these frogs in the background.
the rain. They're really happy.
Anyway, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Is that okay with everyone?
Thanks, everybody.
Second.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Night.